history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this Friday, September 14, 2018 day. I am your host, Nick Pitts, and so grateful that you decided to join us for this weekend review, this weekend recap. I'm joined here in studio with Lathan Watts of the First Liberty. How are you, Lathan?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me back.
So good to be here with you. So good to be here with you. And for the listeners, I'm sorry that you have to put up with me again. You already put it up with me on Wednesday, and you get me twice, so I don't know what punishment you've done to deserve this, but nevertheless, now Lathan's got to deal with it in studio, so I hope you're ready, Lathan.
We'll find out.
This is great. So we've got a great show for you today. We'll have Max Lucado that will be joining us at the 2 o'clock hour, so from 2 to 3, he's got a new book out called Unshakable Hope. He's also got a great event that he's going to be publicizing relative to Israel, so you're going to want to stick around and listen in on that, but also there's some news that's been happening, so we'll kind of recap some of the news of the day, specifically the Botham Jean, just tragedy that continues to unfold here in Dallas. We'll talk a little bit about that. Also, the latest updates on the Kavanaugh case. And then this idea of Christians and social justice. This has continued just to reverberate around the headlines about the idea of, is there a Christian mandate for social justice? Because we know in the political narrative, there's so much about the social justice warriors, et cetera, et cetera. But is the biblical narrative an advocate for social justice? And Michael Gerson of the Washington Post and formerly of the Bush 43 White House, wrote a pretty stinging op-ed that we'll link to and we'll talk about a little bit more, and we'll also be taking some of your phone calls during that. But that should be a really rich discussion as well. But we're also going to be opening up the phone lines. And so if you'd like to call in with a question or comment, you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212, or Facebook.com/Point of View Radio. You leave comment that you leave online, we'll try our best to share over air as well. But nevertheless, let's get into it. Yesterday, Botham Jean, who was the 26-year-old accountant at Price Waterhouse, I believe, here in the Dallas area, had his funeral yesterday. He was the individual that was shot late last week. I believe it was Thursday night of last week, 26 years old. An officer mistakenly, after getting off work, I think either a 12 or 15-hour shift, she got off work and she went into the wrong apartment. She thought it was the 4th floor, ended up being the 3rd floor. And I guess the details from here are a little speculative, but ended up shooting Botham and he ended up dying. And now they had the funeral yesterday, but just continues just to be this ongoing tragedy, Lathan, of really we're just left with so many questions, and without we have our questions and we just have our grief because of this right now.
Absolutely. Botham was an alumni of Harding University, my alma mater, and some of the faculty were able to attend the service yesterday. I was not able to attend. I was able to watch a little bit of it on live stream, but one of the faculty members there, Sam Jeffrey, wrote about what he saw there, and had a really deep impact on me. And I'm grateful to him giving his permission for me to be able to read this on the air today. I just think it's a beautiful description of what he saw there. I kind of pride myself on being able to turn a phrase, but when someone has already done it much better than you ever could, just get out of their way and let them speak. So with your indulgence, I'll just read what Sam wrote about what he saw there. He said, "It's a strange thing to mourn someone you never knew. Today, I joined 10 other Harding folks for the long round trip to Richardson, Texas, to attend the memorial service for Botham Jean. Botham is the young man that was shot and killed in his own apartment by a Dallas police officer. The details of how that exactly happened are both disputed and horrifically tragic. What is not disputed is that Botham was an incredible young man who both loved and was loved by hundreds of people. He was a follower of God and a leader of men, a powerful combination. I would not pretend to be objective in this story. I frankly don't see how that is possible for anyone. There may be many versions of the story, but they all end in an innocent man's death. No, I'm not objective at all, but I am amazed. Do you realize that today I sat in a church filled with people from every background? Race, politics, money, geography. These are things we did not have in common. I sat in a room with the mom of the deceased and the boss of the woman who killed him, and saw nothing but grace and kindness. I sat in a room that the world says shouldn't exist, but I was there. Hearts were broken, dreams were crushed. I watched Botham's mother, propped up by friends in case her legs failed, sob as she looked at the body of her son. It would all be unbearable if it wasn't for the God that Botham served. You see, we all saw the casket, but we were all looking beyond it. We saw death wrapped up in a casket, but the room was wrapped in victory. The casket contained a body. It could never hold Botham. Because of Christ's great love, we were not overcome by anger, grief, or even death. In fact, hands were shook, hugs were given, eye contact was made between strangers, and nothing but kindness was communicated. A meal was offered, and a table was set for all who would join. I wish you could have been there. What I'm about to say won't be popular, but that has no bearing on the truth of it. What I experience today cannot happen outside of Christ. The differences are too vast. Language, passions, and prospects are not shared, and if we all demand the spotlight in our own lives, we are destined for the ash heap. It is in humble abdication of ourselves that things like today can happen. The world says things like today can't exist, but I was there. I saw it all, the grace, the strength, the unity. I went to Botham Jean's memorial, and he'd be proud because I saw his God there.
Wow. What a powerful testimony. For those of you that aren't aware, Botham went to Harding University. It's a Christian university, and Botham was just very actively pursuing in his faith and just seeking to live out his faith with fear and trembling. And I think one of the interesting things that I found out about Botham is he actually led worship multiple times at Harding University. He was an active member of a church here in the Dallas area. And when you think about his career of being an accountant at PricewaterhouseCoopers, I mean, it's just one of the top institutions in accounting, in the accounting industry. And it really was just not only a man that wanted to serve his church and to love his church, but also seek to make an impact as well. And I don't think there could be a better testimony for a young man than an individual that really did love God and then tried to love others as well.
Absolutely. I did not know him. He graduated many years after I did. I'm much older than him. But by all accounts, I do have friends on the faculty there. He was everything you would want your son to be, or everything you would want in a man for your daughter to marry. Yeah,
that's phenomenal. And so we'll have to take a break here shortly. But when we come back from the break, since we have Lathan, what we'll do is there's just some legal questions that I just have, just because, again, we have so many questions that are circulating and details still yet to emerge from it. And so there's just an idea of, was this officer in the wrong? What are they? Are they being charged with murder, manslaughter? What are the ramifications of that? And so a lot of the questions that you all might be having right now, I know I have, and I'm thankful that Lathan is here to help sort it out. I didn't watch Law and Order lately, so I don't really have my legal expertise as sharp as I'd like. But nevertheless, if you have a question or a comment that you'd like to call in with, you can do so at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212, or make your way over to facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Leave a question or comment. But when we come back from the break, we're going to talk more about Botham Jean, about his life, and then around this case, too. Some revelations came out yesterday that I think will be very indicative, but also very helpful as we continue to try to make sense of this. But we got to take a break, but we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Perhaps you've been involved in a political discussion with people and wondered how they could be so naive about foreign policy or criminal justice because they just wanted to believe every person is basically good. Perhaps you've been sharing your faith with someone who rejected the idea of a savior because he or she rejected the idea of human sinfulness. So many people in America are naive about human nature, evil, and sin because they live in one of the greatest countries in the world that is insulated from the harmful realities of life. In many countries, greed and corruption are a way of life. I know that people in America complain about political corruption, but it isn't anything compared to what is a daily experience in many other countries. We're also shielded from strife and civil war. We've had an occasional terrorist attack that is unsettling, but we live in a world far removed from the daily threats people in other countries face. Dennis Prager writes about his experience at the University of California in Berkeley. He had a debate or dialogue with two left-wing students. His final question to them was, "Do you believe people are basically good?" Without hesitation, they said yes. He reminded them that they could only think that way because they live in such a decent country insulated from poverty, corruption, and war. But he was troubled that just 2 generations after Auschwitz, they could be so naively believing in this. Since no Western religion based on the Bible teaches that people are basically good, this naivete is obviously the result of secularism. This naive view of human nature keeps many from seeing the need for deterrence and protection from evildoers, and it keeps them from seeing their need for the gospel. It is one of the greatest mental obstacles we face whenever we engage in a discussion about human nature. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Universal 1440, Unbroken, Path to Redemption, the rest of World War II hero Louis Zamperini's true story, now playing, rated PG-13.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined on this weekend update with Lathan Watts of the First Liberty Institute, and we have been talking a little bit about the tragedy of Botham Jean, the unarmed man that was shot on Thursday of last week here in the Dallas area, and just kind of Lathan just read a touching tribute from one of the professors that attended his funeral, which was yesterday. But let's try to walk through this case a little bit right now. You've got a man that is in his apartment, and then all of a sudden, just an officer that had just got off work had come in. I guess she was disoriented. I guess it was just an exhausting day, as almost any day as a police officer would be. And then from there, we're just left with a lot of details right now.
Exactly. Worst thing we can do is jump to any sort of conclusions.
Yeah.
Which tends to be the sort of MO when anything like this happens in the press. Everybody's always quick to try to draw conclusions, or the slightest, pounce on the slightest detail and try to expand that into something that it may or may not be. But my understanding is basically how you described it. The officer, finished her shift, came home, and just mistakenly, I think her apartment was was on the 4th floor and his was on the 3rd, and just went to the wrong door, and went to put her key in the door, and the door opened. Mm-hmm. So if you're in that situation and you think you're entering your apartment and the door's already open, you suspect something bad is probably going on. And she sees someone in the apartment, according to her, gave instructions that, according to her, he didn't follow, and she drew her weapon and fired. So that is basically all that I know about what happens. And I really think I mean, it's all that we probably ever will know because there are only two people there, and one of them is no longer alive to tell the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've gotten one. The officer has given kind of an understanding of her recollection of the events, and she says that she just walked in and there wasn't a tussle or anything, and according to what's been reported thus far, it doesn't appear there's case shells from the bullets that came out, so that are right around the door area. There's some. And then there is his body and the blood. So it doesn't appear as though there was a tussle back and forth. But then I guess one of the things, and again, this is just that social media world that we live in. Yesterday there was the funeral, and there was an individual, and news broke out, and Fox, for the local news affiliate, broke the news, and now they have a viral tweet for all the wrong reasons relative to finding out that there was marijuana. And there was just a little bit of marijuana that was in the house, and a lot of people are just wondering, what does this have to do with the case? This was just a man in his own house, or in his own apartment rather, and he was just shot for being in his own apartment. And so, from a legal standpoint, does this have any bearing whatsoever in the case?
Not in my opinion.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's completely irrelevant to what happened there.
Yeah.
One person shot another person.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else that you find in that apartment, really, other than ballistics or those sorts of things, are not relative. I mean, she didn't shoot him because she thought he was a drug dealer.
Yeah.
According to her, she shot him because she thought he was in her apartment.
Yeah.
And whatever else they found in the apartment really doesn't have any bearing on the case. I don't know why that information was leaked or brought up. It's completely irrelevant as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so help us to understand from a legal standpoint too. So, according to what we're hearing reports, is that she's being charged for manslaughter right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, help us to differentiate between manslaughter and murder.
The easiest way to explain it is typically in a murder charge, you are showing that the person actively intended to kill the other person. A manslaughter conviction is usually like a lesser included offense in a charging document. So a lot of times, if prosecutors may think that it actually is murder, but they're unsure about their case for murder or whether or not the jury would go all the way to murder, and they would include manslaughter as a lesser included offense because the penalties are less than for murder, and they feel like that may be their best chance at a conviction.
Yeah.
I don't know, what all went into the decision to charge, to make the charge manslaughter. But some people have tried to make a big deal out of, should she be charged with murder or should she be charged with manslaughter? I think the most important thing is that there's accountability.
Yeah.
And
at the end of the day, justice demands to be served right now.
An innocent man lost his life.
Yep.
And regardless of who pulled the trigger, that person should be held accountable for her actions.
Yeah. And so it seems as though with the manslaughter charge, then what they're saying is there was no intent for this woman to be to come in. She didn't have an intention of finding Botham's apartment and then going and shooting him. It was just an accident. It was an accident because she felt threatened at that particular moment, I would just assume.
Basically, yes. There is, there's case law, and honestly, I'm not sure what the case law in Texas is, but there's case law that basically shows that if you have even a moment to consider your actions and you pull the trigger anyway, that can go to show that you had the chance to make a decision and you made a decision, and that can show intent and therefore could justify a charge of murder.
Yeah.
The typical kind of law school example that people always use for manslaughter is like husband comes home and finds wife with another man and just completely loses it and kills the guy, and wasn't maybe in his complete right mind. We're not going to charge that guy with manslaughter because he didn't come home intending to kill somebody. He walked into a situation, completely lost control of his self, of his emotions, and acted. Yeah. That doesn't change the fact that he killed someone, and he still has to be held accountable for that. So you're talking about, as lawyers do, gray areas.
Yeah.
And but as I said, the most important thing is that there's accountability and that there's some sort of justice for an innocent man losing his life.
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things. And Evie, I believe, I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right, Evie on Facebook brings up a pretty good point. But again, it's just really hard to just recreate or to live vicariously in that moment. So Evie brings up, and you don't notice the furnishings aren't your own walking into the apartment. Well, I think there's a component to it that, one, yeah, I pretty much know what my a place looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know because I've stubbed my toe enough times. Like I know my way around it, especially at night. And so there's a part of it that once I could argue, well, it was night, didn't really see exactly what it looked like. But then there's another part of it that you could argue, well, at the end of the day, like I know what my house looks like even in the dark right now. Which I think gets to something undergirding a lot of this, which for our Dallas listeners will understand. But in Minnesota, for example, where this is also being broadcast, it's the idea there's a lot of racial tension here in the city. There's just a great the economics and the socioeconomic divide here is pretty significant here. And so Botham was an African American individual. This officer was not, and so there's just a lot of animosity right now centered around that as well. I think that would be accurately characterized.
I think that's what some people are trying to turn this into.
Yeah.
And trying to capitalize on it to maybe further some other agenda.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, until we really know all the facts, what you have based on what I know is a tragic set of events that resulted in an innocent man's death.
Mm-hmm.
And there should and will be accountability for the person who caused it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see what race has to do with any of that.
Yeah, and from the eyes of the law, so obviously, so you want this desire of there was a law that was broken, there's a man that has died, and so let's figure out what the punishment deserves to be. And so, but in the midst of it, the cultural component of it is that the reality is, if you take away the kind of the black and whiteness of the law, and what you see is that you add the living color of the economic inequality, the racial tension here in the Dallas area. It's just it's highlighting a lot of the emotions that have already been at play here in the Dallas area, especially exemplified in everything from the police shooting 2 years ago to even just the tension that we continue to live in right now relative to kind of some of the Confederate statutes, et cetera, et cetera. So this just doesn't help whatsoever. And at the end of the day, though, you're right in the fact that there's a man that has lost his life right now, and not just lost his life, but man, what would the community lost? Right.
Exactly.
He's 26 years old. He's upstanding. He's an individual that was contributing to the community, that was an asset to the community, that was working for the betterment of it and for the glory of God to extend the kingdom. So I think some of these reactions that individuals are feeling isn't just the loss in the moment, but the future loss that will continue to incur as the days continue to move forward, because we'll just continue. One of the questions that will be asked is, what if? What if? And so we've got to take a break, but when we come back from the break, we'll continue talking a little bit about Botham Jean, some of the tragedy, and we'll also transition over to talk about the latest with the Kavanaugh hearings. And we'll be taking some of your phone calls as well. So you can call in 800-351-1212 and also on Facebook.com/PointOfViewRadio. We'll be back right after this.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate 2 replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, joined by Lathan Watts of First Liberty Institute. And we have been talking a little bit about the tragedy right now, the Botham Jean case. That his funeral was yesterday. The tragedy happened where a police officer, unbeknownst to her, accidentally walked in to an apartment late on Thursday night of last week and tragically ended up shooting Botham. He died at the hospital a little later, and now we're continuing to hear more and more details about the case and more about what's going to continue to move forward. But I think Evie on Facebook really brought up a really good point, and I think you can speak a little bit to this, Lathan, of the idea of there's a level of exhaustion because police officers are just always on when they come in. But then there's also I think all of us would respond. We're so familiar with our houses that when we recognize there's something that's not supposed to be there, or rather someone, that it's the thing that immediately draws us, right?
Exactly. I understand her point that, how could somebody not know this was not her apartment? But then at the same time, also, having some family in law enforcement, I also understand just how exhausted they are when they finish a shift. And it is actually believable to me that somebody, could think they had walked up 4 flights when they'd actually gone up 3.
Yeah.
And if that's the case and you think you're entering your own apartment and the door's already open, and as you start to enter, you see someone there, you are not focused on the furnishings of that apartment. You are focused 100% on the person that is in that apartment that you, mistakenly or not, think is your apartment. And so I can definitely see her side of this as well. And it is a tragic set of circumstances. And I think we should all, withhold judgment as best we can until we know as much as we can. If other things come to light and it proves that there is something more to this, then deal with it then. But don't throw gasoline on a fire by jumping to a conclusion that may support a narrative that you already believe in, whether that's we back the blue or Black Lives Matter or whatever you bring to this situation. You do everyone a disservice if you read that into the little bit that you actually know.
And I think from a Christian perspective too, because I think we're just living. This is probably we'll go with for those that listen on Wednesday. This is probably a soapbox that I have. I think we're just living in a false dichotomy age that you either have to back the blue or Black Lives Matter, or you do all. Like at the end of the day, like I can support police officers, but I can also understand the inequalities that the African American experience here in the U.S. And I hate that I have to choose one over the other, because at the end of the day, like I've got some of my greatest friends in life are police officers right now. And whenever there's a tragedy that happens that involves a police officer, they're one of the first ones that I'm talking to. And usually there's 2 comments that are made on text message. Help me understand this, and know that I'm pulling away to pray for you right now, because right now they're already under a lot of cultural fire right now. But then add on top of that the reality of no one calls a police officer to a celebration. At the end of the day, the only way that they're getting invited to something is because there's a breakdown in society, and they have to enforce the peace. They have to restore the peace in this moment. But then also to understand that I recognize the inequalities that the African American has experienced in our culture. Even in 2018, I understand that. Like I won't be able to comprehend it, but I can understand it based on some of the data. So I hate the fact that we have to choose one side, because when we choose one side, we're wanting to pick it or wanting to respond, when in reality, I think there's a biblical sense that we're missing the idea of just simply mourning the fact, like I said, Botham, not only was he a great man and not only did he live a great life, but we don't even know what the future could hold. And we not only is his family losing, but his community's losing too, because of all the potential that still remains potential now that we'll never see anymore.
You're exactly right. And there is, I think, a tendency in human nature to assume that our personal experience is the same as that my experience is the norm. whether that's good or bad. So if you've had a bad encounter with a police officer, it's kind of human nature to assume, well, this is how it always happens.
Yeah.
Because that's how it happened to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or if you've never had a bad experience with a police officer, your experience is, this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And both are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to objectively, as you said, understand that have there been situations that have been poorly handled in the past? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that every interaction between police and any community,
Yeah.
take your pick,
Yeah.
are all going to be the same? Of course not.
Mm-mm.
And just like you said, the police are not often called to deal with happy situations.
Yeah.
We also rarely hear about situations the police are involved in that are resolved
Mm-hmm.
in a very professional and amicable. People are quick to complain about something that didn't go the way they think that it should.
Yeah.
They're not as quick to praise somebody when they think, that's exactly how that should have happened.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go on Facebook and compliment the officer for being polite when he gave me that speeding
Yeah.
ticket. It doesn't happen that way. People are not really, that's not what we do,
No.
right? But if the officer was rude to us, we'll be on Facebook in a heartbeat talking about it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing because the underlying assumption, the indirect, probably the not necessarily the emphatic point that you were trying to make in the assumption was the reality that we always are responding, but that response is amplified now in this social media world. We feel an immediacy now to either share it on Facebook, to tweet it out, and to try to create. I don't know if it's whether it's the direct intention, but there's definitely the assumption this potentially could go viral, which just is the need to be known. And so I think it's really important. And what we've seen is the loss in the midst of this is just the reality to be able to mourn. Like, we just can't mourn anymore. Like, there's just a quick need to make these knee-jerk reactions, which to a certain extent, we recognize that we're not guaranteed tomorrow. So we do want to see justice. And I think that sense of justice is an imprint of the divine within us. But there's also the desire, recognizing from Ecclesiastes 3, there's a season for everything. And sometimes there just needs to be a season to feel the weight of the loss so that we don't respond in a way that's overreacting or knee-jerk, but really does satisfy that divine desire of wanting to see justice, not an injustice perpetrated from the opposite side, but just true justice, that it's been done, that there has been a wrong that's been committed in our society, and based upon image bearers of God, we want to see the evil restrained in our society in order that we might move forward in a more beneficial and prosperous.
Certainly. And I think it's always helpful to keep in mind that there is only perfect justice. The only perfect justice is God's justice.
Yeah.
And it will eventually be made right.
Mm-hmm.
And situations like this, yes, you're exactly right. We need to properly mourn what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind that only God's justice is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But also remember, God's justice is perfect because it is also attended with mercy, and he balances the two perfectly, and only he can do that.
Oh, yeah.
Our justice system is imperfect because it is administered by imperfect human beings. We have an obligation to do the best we can, and that's what we do. It's probably not always going to result in every case being decided the way we think that it should.
Yeah.
But all will be made right at some point.
Yeah.
And only God can do that. And we should be a little careful when we talk about dispensing justice. I mean, I went into the law for a reason. I'm a huge believer in justice, but I also understand the component of mercy that has to come along with justice.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to my own accountability to God, I'm a much bigger believer in mercy than justice.
Yeah,
I want that perfect justice that only God can give.
Yeah, I'm reminded specifically in Habakkuk 3 right now. He says that in Habakkuk is recognizing the Assyrians are coming after him. They loom on the horizon. God's already instructed Habakkuk in Habakkuk 2:3 to write very large letters. The idea that the righteous will be saved by faith, and the reality of even knowing that the Assyrians are coming, even knowing that the Assyrians are going to come and steal from their homeland and take them away captive, that Habakkuk in that moment, in his Shagaian oath is what it's called in Habakkuk 3:2, he says that in wrath remember mercy. Like, it's the recognition that I know that there's a punishment that I'm due, but remember mercy in the midst of that. And I think that's a pretty important, especially from a Christian perspective, recognizing that we live in a broken world, but we've been blessed by God to be been born in a system that tries to enact justice, that does its best to have an orderly system in order that we might be able to experience peace, evil might be punished so that good might be propagated by individuals that have the religious liberty, as well as just within their own to be able to be agents of good in their society in order that they might be able to pursue after happiness. But nevertheless, we've got to take a break right now. But when we come back from the break, we're going to switch conversations a little bit, and we'll talk about the latest from the Kavanaugh hearings. And so we'll be back right after this.
Family leave that allows mothers to take time off work when a baby is born is a time-honored policy in America. More recently, dads have been receiving leave too. But traditionally, it's either unpaid or paid by a person's employer as a benefit. Some companies offer very generous paid family leave. Sometimes employees save up vacation or other paid time off and use it to stay home with a newborn or newly adopted child. Now, Senator Marco Rubio has introduced a bill that would put government into the equation. He has rolled out legislation that would essentially allow new parents to borrow from their future Social Security benefits to pay for time off when their baby comes. This bill supposedly pays for itself by fast-forwarding to retirement when parents would forego the first 3 to 6 months of Social Security checks. I appreciate the sentiment. Senator Rubio loves to help parents, but there are many problems with his proposal. First, it creates a new entitlement. What entitlement that has started out small and targeted has ever remained that way? Second, Social Security already has a lot of pressure on it. It's projected to be insolvent in 16 years. Parents having children now won't retire for at least another 30 years. Third, the proposal would remove the incentive for companies to offer paid family leave. One analysis done by Ben Giddis at the American Action Forum found that 2/3 of workers who took family leave were paid, with most receiving their full salary. Mr. Rubio claims his proposed leave policy would not expand government. But the Wall Street Journal asks, what is expanding government if not taking a benefit financed by private industry and administering it through a government program? In this current worker shortage, companies who want to attract young workers could offer generous family leave or flexible schedules to accommodate child rearing. We don't need a government entitlement. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the roundtable by Lathan Watts. We have been talking a little bit about the Botham Jean tragedy that unfolded here in Dallas, just kind of trying to think through it from just trying to be very nuanced, trying to be very considerate, but also just trying to recognize just the hurt that's become from it. An individual, an officer, after a long, exhausting shift, accidentally went into the wrong apartment. She went to put her key in. The door automatically swung open. She saw an individual. She saw Botham there in the dark, apparently, and ended up shooting him, killing him. And so now it seems as though Dallas, which is a city that's known for the racial tension that's at a pretty high level right now finds herself again at a place where it's just been amplified. even more so because of this. I saw on Facebook last night, actually, there was a Dallas City Council meeting that they actually had to put into recess because tensions just got so high. But our thoughts and prayers go out to the Jean family and friends, and just if you're of the praying kind, we would just greatly appreciate your prayers here in the Dallas area, just because this is yet again another log in the fire of just a lot of tragedy that's happening right now, and some of the racial strife just continues to be intensified here. But we're going to transition a little bit and talk about something else where there's a lot of aggressiveness relative to the Kavanaugh hearings. And so we've just there was just yesterday. Lathan actually came into the studio before the show, and I was watching a video that kind of was satirically depicting kind of that first day where there was just so much grandstanding on the from Democrats in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and there was just this. It was chaos. It was chaos. At the very end of the day, it was chaotic. And Reason Magazine put out this very satirical video, and I hate that this is where we're at now.
Absolutely. I was at the Texas Chapters Conference of the Federalist Society last weekend. We were honored to have Justice Thomas there as the keynote. Oh, wow. And he actually mentioned in responding to a question about the process, because his confirmation hearing, as you're probably not old enough to remember, but may have heard since then, how bad his confirmation process was. So there was a question to him about the current process with Kavanaugh, and he mentioned how the process has devolved into what it is. And his comment was, think about the word honorable, not the title, the honorable, but the word honorable, and how much better off we would be if people acted honorably. And he sort of, as an offhand, he said, instead of acting like Spartacus, and which was, a reference to Cory Booker's antics, and it got a big laugh out of the crowd. But, then I think CNN rebroadcast that, and it was popped around social media and Drudge Report and elsewhere. But it does a disservice to not just Kavanaugh personally, but to the process in and of itself. This is a process that is outlined in the Constitution, as was mentioned in the hearings. Many justices have been appointed and confirmed without incident, and it was really a relatively recent phenomenon that has gotten to what it is. And I think that is partly due in part because of the increased role of the judiciary in settling some matters that, frankly, the judiciary was not intended to settle.
And I think that was one of the great points that Ben Sass, the Republican senator out of Nebraska, brought up, like the idea that it's Congress, it's the legislative branch's role to be able to come out with being one way or the other on environment. That's not a judge's role, right? Like, he continues to go back to that tried and true point of a judge wears black in order that he might not be able to enact laws, but he might be able to enforce laws.
Absolutely. I mean, it is the proper role of the legislative branch is to enact laws, and in cooperation with the executive branch to make policy. Judges were never intended to make policy, but we've gotten to a point, and frankly, this is my humble opinion, due to the abdication of Congress of a lot of their responsibility, that judges have an increased role. They shouldn't, but their decisions have such an impact because Congress has abdicated its authority over many years to both the judiciary and to the executive, which led to the rise of the administrative state, that if Congress was doing its job, the judges would not be as important as many people think that they are today. And the antics that we see in these confirmation hearings would likely not be happening if we just adhered to the separation of powers and the system of government that's laid out in our Constitution. Yeah,
and so and the kind of the latest antics, just to be able to catch you up. So yesterday there was quite a bit of fireworks, quite a bit of antics that came out. Even though I don't believe that. Well, they were in committee hearing, but The latest kind of annex, it comes courtesy of Hillary Clinton, who was our former Secretary of State, also ran for president in 2016, as I'm sure many of you know. She decided that she was going to tweet out a point that has often been made by the senator from California, Kamala Harris. And so in her tweet, she said, quote, "I want to be sure we're all clear about something that Brett Kavanaugh said in his confirmation hearings last week. He referred to birth control pills as abortion-inducing drugs. That set off a lot of alarm bells for me, and it should for you too." And as of right now, I'm looking at it. It appears as though it's gotten over 6,000 retweets, 17,000 likes, and went out to millions of followers of her. But there's just one problem. There's a multitude of problems with this, but I guess the primary problem would be that this is false.
Demonstrably false and proven false before she tweeted it out. There's no way she didn't know it was false when she did it.
I think that's
willful ignorance, the willful suspension of disbelief, which is another of her famous quotes when she was attacking a man of the military. That's exactly what it would require in order to put that out.
And here, the frustrating thing is the reason why we're so quick to be able to point out that it was false is because it was false when Senator Harris, give honor where honor is due. When Senator Harris, the junior senator from California, when she kind of made a video clip in which Kavanaugh appears to refer to birth control pills as an abortion-inducing drugs, but the video was edited to kind of make a point.
He was asked a question about a case and about an argument made in a case, and he was speaking basically the argument in the case.
Yeah.
It was not his personal opinion that these drugs are XYZ, whatever what he was supposed to have said.
Yeah.
That was quickly debunked after the senator put it out. And then days later, Hillary Clinton puts it out after it has already been proven wrong.
And I think this probably is a larger point that we'll probably have to get back to because we're coming up on a break. But I think this is a larger point that individuals aren't necessarily trying to propagate truth anymore. They're not trying to put truth out there. They're simply trying to either, one, stir up their base, or two, elicit a response from the opposition because they know that's the thing that gets the most attention anymore. So anything that I can do, and this isn't just a left side of the aisle. I mean, this happens on both sides of the aisle now. It's not simply just trying to form a coalition that agrees about a shared set of facts, but now it's like, how can I troll the other side enough? How can I own the libs? Or how can I troll after the right in such a way that I can try to earn or garner more popularity over this particular tweet or point or video clip that they're trying to make?
Totally agree, and it is it's childish and it's superficial, and you never get into a truly substantive debate anymore because people are too concerned, as you mentioned, and as Justice Thomas mentioned in his remarks in Fort Worth, about what's going to go viral, what's going to get me this. And let's remember what a virus is.
Yeah,
okay?
Great point.
It is not something that is healthy for you.
Yeah.
So if your goal in life is to do something to go viral, reassess your life goals.
Yeah, and go see a doctor immediately. But nevertheless, we got to take a break right now. But when we come back for the break, we'll talk a little bit more about the Kavanaugh hearings, a little bit more about just this idea of, are we even talking to each other anymore? Because I know that's been kind of the common trope that's been put out there. But I would submit that we're not talking to one another anymore. We're talking through one another. So we're utilizing the opposition to talk through them to be able to get to our base and then hopefully to be able to stir up emotions. But we'll also come back from the break and we'll be taking some of your phone calls. So you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212 or facebook.com/pointofviewradio. We'll be back right after this.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed, every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined in studio by Lathan Watts of the First Liberty Institute, and we're making our way into the second hour. So to catch you up on the first hour, for those of you that weren't a part of the Dallas or the Minnesota market, we were talking a little bit about the tragedy that's been kind of racked our city right now here in the Dallas area, specifically around Botham Jean. There's the tragedy that happened with an individual last Thursday night. He was just in his apartment. There was a police officer that, for all intents and purposes, did not know that she was walking into his apartment. Instead, she pulled her gun, shot him. He later died at the hospital. Just a great tragedy, and it's only intensified now where there's just so much surrounding this case that we don't know. But what we do know is that Dallas historically has just got just the racial tension has always been very high here, and this just happened to involve an African-American man. And so it's just a great tragedy right now. But as Lathan so well put kind of in the first hour, we just need to suspend judgment right now to recognize, just to mourn the fact that this is a tragedy. Not only have we lost an individual that was just presently what we know from him from the past as well in the present. He was just a really good man that was following after God. And then just the potential loss that we'll have making our way into the future of what won't be seen. But then we transitioned and talked a little bit about the ongoing Kavanaugh confirmation hearings right now. Well, I kind of want to just call it the Kavanaugh circus that's going on right now, is what it seems like it is.
Yeah. It's excuse me. Yes, it is. I'm sort of a legal nerd, obviously, and a political nerd, and so I pay attention to stuff like this. And I've never seen a confirmation hearing devolve into what happened with Kavanaugh, where you had people stand up and yelling and screaming in the room.
I mean, it was 70 people were arrested. There were 70 people. There were over 80 interruptions just even on the first day that elongated it by hours on end. It's just unbelievable what it's turned into now.
Yeah, when you see his young daughters have to be escorted from the room, I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, or whatever. That's disgusting. The man has achieved a level of excellence in his profession to even be nominated to this position. And every nominee deserves a fair hearing and one that reflects the importance of the position to which he's being nominated, whether or not he or she is confirmed, and that respects our process that is prescribed by the Constitution. And I think about this man's family having to be escorted out because, these young children, would you want your kids to see your dad treated that way?
And I think that even illuminates, that was just intensified. So his children were escorted out, I believe, on day one is when they kind of left. But now I can't imagine they would be anywhere near the confirmation hearings, even yesterday. So yesterday, there was just much swirl, much that was made around the ambiguous statement that was put out by Senator Dianne Feinstein of California, just not being able to confirm anything, but she heard something that was now going to the feds for investigate. Trying to make news by not really making news, by not giving anything substantive. It comes out now that apparently she had been told by a couple of individuals that when Brett Kavanaugh was 17 years old, he might have crossed the state lines, and that he had a relationship with another 17-year-old across state lines. And that's in this Me Too movement era that we're living in right now. It just seems as that's going to be the thing right now. And even just literally late breaking about 5 minutes ago, Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh forcefully denied the anonymous allegation of decades-old sexual assault, which was the latest unexpected twist in an increasingly circus-like atmosphere that is the Senate confirmation hearing. And this was probably the thing that stung so hard for me, just because you have literally the senior senator from California that's using her position and her platform to literally do anything that she can, nothing substantive about this whatsoever. And there was no substance about it. And then to recognize this happened when he was 17 years old. The man is 50-plus years old now. And not only is he 50-plus years old, but he served in 3 other federal offices that would have had to require him to go through these background checks.
Background checks.
Yeah, and it's just ludicrous. It's just absolutely ludicrous right now.
And the fact that she reportedly had this information given to her prior to his hearing did not bring it up in the hearing. Probably because she's smart enough to know that she would have been laughed out of the room, if not escorted out of the room, and waited until the hearing was over, and we're now approaching the point where he can be voted on, and then decided to toss this out there. This is, in my opinion, she is trying to turn Kavanaugh's name into a verb the way they turn Bork's name into a verb.
Yeah.
If this is successful, it will be from hence, forevermore referred to as being Kavanaugh. If she's allowed to succeed by doing this, by just taking an anonymous complaint after the hearing has already been done, and she met with him, by the way.
Yeah, she was one of those. He met with 65 senators, and she was one of the 65 that he met.
Did she ask him?
What? Yeah, I think that's one of the frustrating things, because at the end of the day, we have a process that's prescribed. We have a process that's been set out, and I guess from a left side, if I was on the left side of the aisle, one of the things that I would be wanting to, obviously, you want someone that understands the law, you want someone that's upstanding, and this would be an allegation. I guess the left understanding of this would be a credible allegation that had to be heard. But then, from what we hear of reports, this wasn't credible. This was something that she held on to in order that it might serve as the Hail Mary to try to buck the process and hopefully in some form or fashion to be able to get Kavanaugh off. I understand the desire to want to have an upstanding individual on the bench, but I do not think that this was out of that desire. Rather, this was just a desire to try to buck the system, to try to delay the inevitable, which is a confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh.
I agree. I mean, she's trying to tank his nomination after she had plenty of opportunity to bring this up if she really was concerned about it.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, it is in this sort of environment, we tend to give credibility to every allegation. And let's remember what he's being considered for, a judicial post. Our justice system is based on the premise of the presumption of innocence of the accused.
Yeah. Great
I
point.
guarantee you Kavanaugh knows that.
Yeah.
So it is a desperate attempt. They are grasping at every straw they can because they know they cannot, at the end of the day, they cannot stop him from being confirmed. They don't have the numbers to do it.
And so, and again, just to remind individuals that right now the Senate aligns 51-49. All it takes is 51 votes. And so that's just a very telling point. And not only was there the anonymous allegation that was put forward by Senator Feinstein yesterday that even just 5 minutes ago, Brett Kavanaugh is denied. We also heard yesterday that Hillary Clinton tweeted. We didn't hear yesterday. We read yesterday that Hillary Clinton tweeted just a blatantly false claim that has been proven false not only by individuals on the right, but also by individuals on the left. So I'm not even going to read it, one, just because we're running out of time, but also two, just because I don't want to spread lies. But it just is another reminder of just the lengths individuals are willing to go right now. Because at the end of the day, we want the best person from all that we've heard about Brett Kavanaugh, he is one of the best that we can hope to have representing and sitting on the bench. But nevertheless, we've got to go to a break right now. But when we come back from the break, we'll be taking some of your phone calls, so you can call in. What do you think about the Kavanaugh nomination? You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212, or facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Leave your question or comment, and we'll try to share it over there. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Perhaps you've been involved in a political discussion with people and wondered how they could be so naive about foreign policy or criminal justice because they just wanted to believe every person is basically good. Perhaps you've been sharing your faith with someone who rejected the idea of a savior because he or she rejected the idea of human sinfulness. So many people in America are naive about human nature, evil, and sin because they live in one of the greatest countries in the world that is insulated from the harmful realities of life. In many countries, greed and corruption are a way of life. I know that people in America complain about political corruption, but it isn't anything compared to what is a daily experience in many other countries. We're also shielded from strife and civil war. We've had an occasional terrorist attack that is unsettling, but we live in a world far removed from the daily threats people in other countries face. Dennis Prager writes about his experience at the University of California in Berkeley. He had a debate or dialogue with two left-wing students. His final question to them was, "Do you believe people are basically good?" Without hesitation, they said yes. He reminded them that they could only think that way because they live in such a decent country insulated from poverty, corruption, and war. But he was troubled that just 2 generations after Auschwitz, they could be so naively believing in this. Since no Western religion based on the Bible teaches that people are basically good, this naivete is obviously the result of secularism. This naive view of human nature keeps many from seeing the need for deterrence and protection from evildoers, and it keeps them from seeing their need for the gospel. It is one of the greatest mental obstacles we face whenever we engage in a discussion about human nature. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Universal 1440, Unbroken, Path to Redemption, the rest of World War II hero Louis Zamperini's true story, now playing, rated PG-13.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined in studio by Lathan Watts, and we've been talking a little bit about the Kavanaugh hearings at the top of the hour. News that came out, obviously, yesterday. We had Senator Dianne Feinstein, the senior senator out of California, put forward an anonymous message. I don't even know how to describe the ambiguity of the tweet that she sent out yesterday, talking about she had heard unconfirmed reports about allegations about it from an anonymous source, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and has put it forward towards federal investigators. And one of the things that came out just about 5 or 10 minutes ago is Brett Kavanaugh and his team have gone ahead and said that these are, he denies these anonymous allegations. And so kind of what we're picking up from, according to reports, is that some of these allegations involve a young Kavanaugh when he was 17 years old with having a sexual relationship with another 17-year-old across state lines, as best we can say. And in this Me Too era, obviously it perks up everyone's ears, but he has denied some of these allegations now. And it's just a kind of just another chapter, it seems as though, on just a very interesting, wild story that's been thus far of the Kavanaugh hearing.
Yeah, I think What I would predict you will likely see now, since I think it was important in that truly ambiguous statement that Weinstein put out, but that she made a point to say that she had referred it to federal investigators. Because what I predict you will now see is calls from the Democrats in the Senate to postpone a vote on Kavanaugh until this investigation can be conducted and he can be either cleared or proven that this actually happened. They're going to say we don't have enough information to cast a vote because we don't know the result of this investigation, and just hide and watch. I'll stake my name on this one. I'll put a prediction out there. They're going to say we need to delay this vote until we have the results of this investigation, and let's give plenty of time for this investigation, and get through the November election, and because I guarantee you, some of them think they're going to take the Senate, and then they can stop his nomination, and that's what this is all about: is delaying the vote. So I think that's why she included that in the statement, that I've referred it to federal, investigators, so that they can now try to delay the vote. But I don't think McConnell will delay the vote. He said he wants him on the court for the October term, which means the vote's going to happen probably sometime in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think that was what was reported out of the Hill earlier today, is that McConnell went on record with the Hill and went ahead and said that he wants the last week of September to be able to vote on the Senate floor about the Kavanaugh confirmation. But again, this was already a playbook. This is just a variation of what the Democrats tried to do on the opening day. Kind of threw up the idea of we haven't seen all his records. We haven't seen any of the charts. We haven't seen all of his documentation. And when over 400,000 papers that were released of 1 million, and that going above and beyond to be able to release so many of the documents, because again, this is an individual that served his country for almost 20 plus years, is just so there's just a lot of public records that were out. But I thought one of the interesting components of it was that individuals like Kamala Harris, that's the junior senator out of California, as well as Cory Booker, who's the junior senator out of New Jersey, continued to offer up, well, we haven't been able to go through. And my favorite response was Chuck Grassley. And Senator Grassley went ahead and said, well, I have offered my staff for 24/7 for the past 2 weeks, and no one has taken me up on that offer. So what is the legitimacy of that you actually wanted to, one, read the records, and then two, before the records were even started to be released, these individuals had already come out and said that they were not going to vote. So it just makes you wonder what's the legitimacy of their claims that they actually want to look at these records.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody knows. I mean, the emperor truly has no clothes in this scenario. Everybody knows what is going on. Okay. How many of these documents that you say you have to vote on him did you have or not have when you voted on him for the D.C. Court of Appeals? He's already been confirmed once to what many people refer to as the second highest court in the land, because it deals with so many things right there in Washington, D.C. So how many of these questions did you not have answered when you were willing to vote on him the first time? And two, I mean, maybe you just need to confirm him to find out what kind of judge he'll be. I mean, you told us you had to pass Obamacare to find out what was in it. Well, maybe you just have to confirm a judge to find out what kind of judge he will be.
That's a great point.
Unless you want to ignore the 300 opinions he has published from the time he's been on the D.C. Court of Appeals. And I would, listeners who are truly interested in the man's philosophy and his record, firstliberty.org, go to our website. You can find articles, Kelly Shackelford's op-ed about Kavanaugh that came out. Really, I mean, as the press conference was happening, we had that op-ed out there. We have information there on the judicial confirmation process, on the nominees that are still waiting for votes, the places that they would serve, some biographical information about the nominees. This is obviously very important to us, what kind of judges are on the courts, and so we've made it our business to know what types of judges these people that are being nominated are. And when they're good nominees, we say so, and if we don't think so, we will say so.
Yeah, I think that illuminates a particular point that's been probably one of the greatest successes, especially from a conservative perspective, of the Trump administration, is just the sheer number of judges that have been appointed and confirmed underneath him. So it shows a strategic cooperation among the legislative branch as well as the executive branch of President Trump. Was unprecedented in nature by releasing a list of 25 judges that he would like to nominate to the Supreme Court, and then two, Don McGahn, who's the White House counsel, of working together with a process to be able to work with the McConnell team to not only identify judges that they want to appoint to some of these federal courts, but also to have them go through Senate, which is another reason why they didn't go into August recess, because they were just continuing. It's like a process. It's like a mill right now, because it's upwards of like 60, right? Or like 60.
He's had more Circuit Court of Appeals nominees confirmed in this period of time than any of his predecessors.
Wow.
And those Circuit Courts of Appeals, those are one level below the Supreme Court.
Wow.
And they deal with far more cases than the Supreme Court actually does, because most of the cases that are going on appeal to the Supreme Court are typically an appeal from that Circuit Court of Appeals level. And the court chooses which cases it's going to hear. The Supreme Court gets thousands of petitions. They may hear 1 or 2% of them. The vast majority of the precedent-setting decisions are made by Circuit Courts of Appeals. So like Texas is in the Fifth Circuit, so Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. If a case goes to that Fifth Circuit, their decision, unless it is appealed, accepted by the Supreme Court, and overturned by the Supreme Court, that decision is the law in Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. And the same goes for the Ninth Circuit and the huge swath of the country that's under the Ninth Circuit, or the Fourth Circuit, where two of our cases that are on their way to the Supreme Court, one is out of the Fourth Circuit, one is out of the Ninth Circuit. Coach Kennedy in the Ninth Circuit, the American Legion, our client, the American Legion, and the Bladensburg World War I Memorial in Maryland, which is in the Fourth Circuit. And that demonstrates how important judicial nominees are. The Fourth Circuit years ago was a reliably moderate to conservative circuit. And when I say conservative, I don't mean like politically conservative. I mean textualist, traditional view of the Constitution. Towards the end of George W. Bush's term, the Democrats were able to basically obstruct the nomination process. And when he left office with a lot of vacancies on the Fourth Circuit. When President Obama became president, the Democrats confirmed every appointee of his to the Fourth Circuit and packed it with Obama nominees. And it is now a reliably liberal court, almost on par with the Ninth Circuit.
Wow.
And that's saying something if you follow the courts. I mean, the Ninth Circuit is universally known as, as the left-wing and also the most overturned, by the way. But that's why this is so important, these Court of Appeals nominees. And then there are a whole other group of nominees to the district courts, which are the federal trial court level. Also lifetime appointments that some of them are waiting on votes because they're trying to get through the Kavanaugh and then the rest of the Court of Appeals nominees.
Yeah.
If Trump was able to appoint and get confirmed judges to all the vacancies that are currently on the Ninth Circuit, it would become a much more balanced court to the tune of, I may get this number not exactly right, but it would, if he filled all the vacancies that he could on the Ninth, it would basically break down like 16-13.
Okay. Wow.
So that's a much narrower, because when you go to the Court of Appeals, you don't sit in front of all of them. You get a 3-judge random draw. And so like our case, the Bladensburg World War I Memorial, the 3 judges we got were 2 Obama appointees and a Clinton appointee.
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of predictable that they ruled against us, right? But the Clinton appointee actually dissented. It was a 2-1 decision.
Yeah.
If he's able to narrow that margin in the Ninth Circuit, then when you go to the Ninth Circuit and you draw that random 3-judge panel, you are far more likely to have a balanced group of judges hearing your case.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, but we got to take a break right now. But we're also going to be taking some of your phone calls. We'd love to hear what your opinion is on the Kavanaugh hearings, some of the circus that's making its way, especially perhaps you want to talk more about what's happening relative to the latest, these anonymous allegations that were put forward by Senator Feinstein, or about his allegations of just the blatant denial. You can call in 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or for those of you on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio, leave a question or comment in the comment box, and what you share online, we'll try to share over air should we have the time and should you be appropriate. But nevertheless, we'll be back right after this.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate 2 replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined in studio by Lathan Watts, and we have been talking a little bit about the Kavanaugh hearings, or I guess I would say Kavanaugh circus, that's kind of making its way and continues on in D.C. And so we'll continue talking about this, but we've also, later on during the hour, we'll be talking a little bit about President Trump, specifically the death toll from Puerto Rico and the tweets that happened yesterday. There's been quite a bit of stir that's happened because of that, so we'll try to get a balanced opinion on that. We'll be taking some of your phone calls as well, because we're already seeing people all the way from in Tennessee, from where they're my home state, that are listening right now in their offices, all the way to Colorado listening. So we'll be taking some of your phone calls, but we're going to jump over to Georgia right now. We've got Pam in Georgia that wants to share her opinion. Pam, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for taking my call. I'm just really amazed. I'm disgusted, but really amazed at what Feinstein is attempting to do. And, you know, you can see in her tiny little insect brain that she held on to this so-called letter that she received, and I think this was exactly what she intended. Well, if we can't get him out, this will do it. And there's, you know, only in something like this is the accused not even allowed to face his accuser. And this Me Too movement, those women better hope that that never happens to them when they're on the other side. But I just think it's outrageous that Feinstein, who had in her employ a Chinese national as a driver, and found out he was spying for his government, and, oh, well, that was okay. And as I said, the Democrats and the left, basically, are very good at being hypocritical. They will cast stones at the other side and accuse them of doing the very things that they are doing, that the Democrats and the left are doing themselves. And, you know, one of their biggest tools is lies. So I don't believe anything that any of them say, because I don't think you can. I think their credibility has been shot.
Pam, quit beating around the bush and tell us what you really think.
Well, I think they're afraid. They're afraid that the big old bugaboo of Roe versus Wade is rearing its ugly head. And if they had forgotten way back when that was decided, and that was also based on a lie, then it was a state's thing. Different states had different laws regarding abortion and the procuring of the same. So it would go right back. If that were ever overturned, it would go right back to the states like it was before.
Yeah, Pam, I think I'll be the feminist on the mic right now. So one of the things that I'm frustrated by because of this is the idea that trying to play upon the Me Too movement and use this piece of evidence that she's had, what we know from reports she's had for weeks, months now, and it delegitimizes the Me Too movement, where there's a lot of horror that's being uncovered, but a lot of good that's happening because individuals are getting the justice that they so rightly deserve. Just even earlier this week with Les Moonves moving out of CBS, he had been doing wrong in the dark, and these allegations had continued to come forward, especially just because of the phenomenal reporting that was happening because of Ronan Farrow at the New Yorker. It delegitimizes the Me Too movement by trying to play upon that wave, ride that wave to such an extent to make this political ploy that's not even legitimate. Right?
Right. And, well, she's an opportunist. That's the thing. These people are opportunists. They don't care who they hurt. They don't care if it's true. And Judge Kavanaugh seems like an upstanding man. And, you know, I mean, this thing, if there were any truth to it, and I had heard from a commentator, and I don't know if this is the latest on it or not, but the FBI has declined to even look into it because they don't think much of it.
Yeah, it's such an interesting, as I often say on Twitter, what a time to be alive, right? Taco Bell was named the best Mexican food restaurant in the country. What a time to be alive. But Taco Bell, no offense on Taco Bell, but nevertheless, I can think of a couple of other Mexican food restaurants that are a little better. But thank you so much, Pam. Appreciate your phone call. It's just an interesting time to be alive right now, Lathan, just to say the very least.
And there's an old, I think it's an old Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. And what a lot of people don't know is that's actually intended to be a curse. When you say that to someone,
oh my goodness,
it's not really a compliment.
Yeah, and so I guess that brings us up to the next story that we'll be talking about to transition out of the Kavanaugh hearings is the tweet that I guess sent a shot around the world. I don't know how you want to say it. So President Trump rejected the Puerto Rican death toll yesterday, and Trump accuses the Democrats of inflating it. So this was out of the New York Times. It said the President Trump on Thursday falsely accused Democrats of inflating the death toll from Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico last year, rejecting that government's assessment that the storm had claimed 3,000 lives. Mr. Trump said that the toll was only 6 to 18 after his count, but that was a time when the estimate of fatalities was changing. It rose to 34 in the hours after the president left the island, and Mr. Trump on Thursday said Democrats have padded the death toll by including, for example, a person who died of old age, quote, in order to make me look as bad as possible. And so there are, I think it's pretty interesting that our president would chime in on this particular topic, to say the least. And I'll go ahead and just say, like, I completely disapprove of what our president did yesterday. There's so much good that he's doing right now, but this was just not one of those things that was good, in my opinion. You can disagree.
Well, I think the response from the Democrats to Trump saying they counted someone who died of old age just to make him look bad, I think their official response was,
Yeah.
That is the level of discourse at this point.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, at some point, you got to let something go.
Yeah.
I don't think we will ever see him do that. I think that's just who he is. And we're probably just going to have to get used to that is sort of the new normal as long as he is in office and Twitter exists and they don't decide to ban him. I think that's just who he is.
Yeah.
And you take the good with the bad. You're exactly right. He's accomplished some good things. I don't agree with him on everything. When he gets it right, I say so. But this is, at best, a distraction. At worst, it's really disrespectful to the people who did die in that hurricane. And I'm talking about on both sides.
Yeah.
The fact that we're arguing over how many people died in this. How about we just focus on protecting the people who are dealing with a hurricane in the Carolinas and potentially Virginia now? And maybe, I don't want to try to read President Trump's mind, but maybe he's a little sensitive to this because the Washington Post editorial board put out a piece that said he's complicit in the hurricane.
Yeah.
Now, you can say that any president of the United States is complicit in a lot of things, and the office of the president is definitely a powerful one.
Mm-hmm.
Affecting the weather? I don't think so.
I think there's a guy named Jesus that affected the weather once. I've never read anything.
The last guy I know that could actually speak to the storm.
As much as I've tried to stop the weather every now and then, especially when I'm playing golf, I've never been able to do it. And so, but nevertheless, it does bring up something that I think is important that we want to illuminate, especially to help educate our listeners. I'm going to go ahead and say, and you can call in 800-351-1212. Again, the number is 800-351-1212. I think it was just disrespectful. I think it was very dishonorable what our president did yesterday by just saying that simply 6 to 18. Now, here's where I will say, though, the numbers have historically always been hard to ascertain the precision of the sheer exact amount of numbers that we have. And because there's just been so many studies that have been put out. So specifically, let's look at some of the studies. Research in the medical journal JAMA estimated that between 1,006 and 1,272 people died. A George Washington University study put that number at 2,975. A Harvard study put that number somewhere between 793 to 8,498. Historically, the numbers have always been very difficult to ascertain relative to the exact number of people that have died. That's been true of what happened in Puerto Rico. That was true with Katrina. That was true with what happened at Harvey. It's always been difficult, but the idea that only 18 people died, like it just seems very dishonorable, especially in times of tragedy. Because I'll go on the other side. The Washington Post op-ed from 2 days ago. Yeah, it was 2 days ago. That's silly. The idea that the president was complicit in the storm. That's absolutely silly to be able to say that. That's just flat out silly. But the president doesn't have to respond to every single instance where people are against him. Because if he did that, he wouldn't lead it all, because he would be responding to the attacks. Because of a study that came out that 90% of the press coverage is negative towards him. So the press has been so antagonistic towards him of the selected from that study in particular. But it's just a reminder again that the president really, there's if I just made, there's at least two things that the president does. The president's fighting and the president's consoling. And during a time after a kind of national loss, because Puerto Rico is a part of the U.S., national loss, we needed the president like the fireside chats from FDR. We needed the consoler that was like President Reagan after the disaster, the Challenger disaster. We needed, especially the week of 9/11 that we celebrated 17 years, we needed the consoler like President George W. Bush did at the National Cathedral. We needed that. We needed that in the moments when we were feeling the loss. We didn't need somebody to fight over the numbers. We had done that during the inauguration. It's time to move on from that. But nevertheless, I'd love to hear from you. Do you disagree with me? That'd be great. I'd love to talk to you. 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. We got to take a break, but when we come back, we'll talk more and take some of your phone calls. We'll be back right after this.
Family leave that allows mothers to take time off work when a baby is born is a time-honored policy in America. More recently, dads have been receiving leave too. But traditionally, it's either unpaid or paid by a person's employer as a benefit. Some companies offer very generous paid family leave. Sometimes employees save up vacation or other paid time off and use it to stay home with a newborn or newly adopted child. Now, Senator Marco Rubio has introduced a bill that would put government into the equation. He has rolled out legislation that would essentially allow new parents to borrow from their future Social Security benefits to pay for time off when their baby comes. This bill supposedly pays for itself by fast-forwarding to retirement when parents would forego the first 3 to 6 months of Social Security checks. I appreciate the sentiment. Senator Rubio loves to help parents, but there are many problems with his proposal. First, it creates a new entitlement. What entitlement that has started out small and targeted has ever remained that way? Second, Social Security already has a lot of pressure on it. It's projected to be insolvent in 16 years. Parents having children now won't retire for at least another 30 years. Third, the proposal would remove the incentive for companies to offer paid family leave. One analysis done by Ben Giddis at the American Action Forum found that 2/3 of workers who took family leave were paid, with most receiving their full salary. Mr. Rubio claims his proposed leave policy would not expand government. But the Wall Street Journal asks, what is expanding government if not taking a benefit financed by private industry and administering it through a government program? In this current worker shortage, companies who want to attract young workers could offer generous family leave or flexible schedules to accommodate child rearing. We don't need a government entitlement. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined in studio by Lathan Watts of the First Liberty Institute. We've been talking a little bit about President Trump's Twitter, so you know that's always been a kind of a fun thing to talk about. But nevertheless, he got in a Twitter fight yesterday with, I would assume that it was a Twitter fight based on the Washington Post op-ed and then a couple of others that were kind of saying that President Trump was complicit with some of the natural disasters that have happened. And President Trump took to Twitter. He said a little bit about he took aim at the death count that happened in Puerto Rico and kind of indicated that it was really only 6 to 18. And obviously that has caused quite a stir. It was forced on it was the headlines of most major newspapers this morning, and it's causing individuals to be a little frustrated. And it has been our case often. There's usually at least a couple of sides that come from it, and so obviously there's been a couple of sides as well. During this, there are some that are justifying it by saying that the president is simply just defending himself because the media is constantly antagonistic towards him. There are others that are saying it's kind of dishonorable towards the American citizens that lost their lives. And we would love to hear from you. 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. Or you can jump over on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Again, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And you there that are looking at the live video feed, you can go right underneath there and leave a comment or a question. And what you share online, we'll try to get to over air as well. And so let's jump on over to Facebook. We've got Diane that says, I can't find fault with our president defending his integrity when the media is constantly lying about him. Someone has to stand up for him so far, and few people are doing that. Notice that when he defends himself, he's usually proven to be telling the truth. And I think Diane brings up a good point in the fact that the media has been very, certain media outlets, a lot of media outlets, I'll say, have been very antagonistic towards President Trump. There was the study that was put out and that was highlighted in the Washington Examiner that indicated that 90% of the coverage of him had been negative. And so there is an antagonistic bent towards particular media outlets right now, right, Lathan?
Yeah, there's no denying that. I mean, the study that you cited, the 90% of the coverage of him is negative. I would only say that taking that into account and looking at what you've been able to accomplish, despite the fact that the coverage of your administration is 90% negative, should tell you that not every hill is one worth dying on. You've got to pick your battles. Okay, you are not ever going to change the minds of people that cover you 90% of the time negatively. I understand the instinct to defend yourself, especially when you don't feel like anyone else will. There's only so many hours in the day. And as president, I mean, I've never been president of the United States, but I imagine the demands on your time are more intense than any job in the history of the world.
Easy.
Okay, so let's just do a little bit better job of picking our battles. That's all I would say.
Yeah, I think we all have those. We all face those scenarios. We're all only given 24 hours a day. Much to my chagrin, I want more time because there's so much more that I want to do. But I recognize that I've only got a certain amount of time in the day, and I know that not every fight is worth picking. Like, so for example, I'll call my roommates out right now. Like, there's just certain instances where I know that I could pick the fight, but at the end of the day, I know picking my fight would only take away more of the time and more of the story and affect the relationship to the extent that I just don't think would be conducive into the future. I would say, and what I argued from a biblical perspective this morning, and you can get the daily briefing where I made this argument. You can go to thebriefing.net and sign up for it. I made the point that what we see is sometimes, again, in this false dichotomy world, we either think that we have to have a president that is solely a consoler or solely a fighter. And what I think you see in the biblical narrative, specifically in the figures of David and Jesus, you see a leader that's both willing to console but also willing to fight. He doesn't have to do one or the other. The leader doesn't have to do one or the other. David wept until he had no strength in 1 Samuel 30, verse 4. And then in the next instance, they were shouting and cheering. Saul has killed thousands. David has killed tens of thousands. Even at the end of 1 Samuel 30, he was killing people towards that end. He was a fighter, one, but then he was also a consoler, too. You see it in Jesus. He was the one that Jesus wept in John 11. But then he was also the one in Matthew that was flipping over tables. I think there are times to fight, but there are also times to console. And I wish, and I'll make this argument, and you're lighting up the phone lines right now. I think people want to talk, that I think there's a time to fight and there's a time to console. This was not the time to fight. I would have liked to have seen him console.
I hope at least one of these callers is one of Nick's roommates.
Yeah, exactly. Because then I'm ready to have the fight. We'll kind of redeem the time and knock out two birds with one stone. Let's go ahead and let's jump over to Texas right now. Elizabeth in Texas. You there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Elizabeth, what's your point of view?
I agree with you totally. Like I was explaining to the gentleman that answered the telephone, Before I'm a Democrat, but before I'm a Democrat, I'm a Christian, and I love God, so I love people like God. I'm sorry I get teary-eyed because it's this notion that if you're a Republican, you don't like Democrats and you down Democrats, and if you're a Democrat, you down Republicans and you don't like Republicans. It's good and bad in both parties. There's no such thing as a perfect president.
Mm-hmm.
Even I didn't vote for Donald Trump, but it's my duty as a Christian to pray for him.
Amen.
He's not perfect. He makes many mistakes. Obama made many mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's just, again, we're Christians first and foremost. For those of us that call on the name of Jesus, we are.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost as if this party, I'm going to stick up for the wrong or whatever. I appreciate you because you said you felt like he was wrong on that statement. That's how I feel. Right is right and wrong is wrong. That's how God is. It's either right or it's wrong.
Yes, ma'am.
So I appreciate you standing up and even, we have to have a heart for man. That's how Jesus was.
Yeah.
Jesus loved everybody. But it's so much division in this country. And there's so much division in politics. You don't have to be, again, I'm a Democrat. It's not my job to hate Republicans. That's not what it's about. There's good Republicans just like there's good Democrats. There are bad Republicans just like there are bad Democrats.
Yeah.
But this notion of no one, Donald Trump is a white president of the United States, so, he's right. No, he's not. He's sometimes wrong, and he sometimes does not show the love that Jesus Christ showed for us. Jesus loved all, and it's just sad how much division there is in this country.
Yes, ma'am. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for your phone call. We greatly appreciate it. Just for commercial break's sake, let's go ahead and jump over to James in Oklahoma right now. James, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, James, what's your point of view?
Well, my point of view, I just heard a woman was talking about, we should have the love of Jesus. We should as Christians.
Yeah.
But President Trump is a man.
Yep.
He's doing a good job by that, I do believe.
Mm-hmm.
But we shouldn't get upset over every little tweet or what he said. At least it tells his personality.
Mm-hmm.
He tries to keep his word, but he's not Jesus.
No.
He's a man.
Mm-hmm.
And we're supposed to be forgiving. So if anyone we should be forgiving more for, and respectful for, it's our own president.
Yeah.
People everybody's getting self-righteous and thinking, that he should be apologizing for every tweet and thing that he says. He can't be perfect, but we should review our own selves. How many mistakes do we make? How many sins do we have each and every day? It just takes me back to hear people comment, and even some of the commentators that, some of you guys, are quickly to dispel and say something against what he says. Oh, look, if you think about the administration and what they have done, they've done a lot for, especially a Christian households. And getting back to the law, it's not about, our politics shouldn't become our religion. It should be politics. And politics, and most politicians, they tell you what you want to hear. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump is a regular politician. He was a businessman, and a very good one.
Yeah, James, we've got to run to a commercial break, and I completely agree with you. I want to give respect where respect is due. I want to pray. I'll always pray for our president, regardless of whatever partisan side that he comes on. But I want to believe it to be true that faithful are the wounds of a friend, and that we can still support him, but also be able to call out wrong when it's wrong. We'll be back right after this.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands, and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team. or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. We are making our way into the third hour now of Point of View. I'm joined in studio by Lathan Watts of the First Liberty Institute, and we have been talking about President Trump and all of shocking twists. So during the first hour, we talked a little bit about the tragedy here in Dallas, specifically the Lathan John shooting that happened late last week, and some of the implications for that, especially now as some of the evidence continues to be gathered, and then the wheels of justice continue to turn. Kind of in the second hour, we started talking a little bit more about the Kavanaugh confirmation circus, and just all the ludicrousness that's coming out of that right now, and what that looks like, especially as we're kind of making our way towards the end of September. It appears as though it'll go before the Senate and be a confirmation vote that's put before the Senate on that. And then kind of towards the end of the second hour, making our way into the third hour, we're going to continue talking about President Trump and specifically taking some of your phone calls, what you thought about his tweets yesterday. So specifically, he was tweeting yesterday about how he thought the media was, the Democrats specifically, were trying to inflate the number of individuals that lost their lives in Puerto Rico because of Hurricane Maria. And so he put that guesstimate around 6 to 18. And then we were kind of moving back and forth. There's one side that was wanting to stick up for the president because they believe the media onslaught that's coming against him. And so they felt the need to be able to support the president. And then there are others of us, and I just put myself as that position, others of us that indicated that we need to support the president, but that doesn't mean we can't call out the president when we believe that he's wrong. And we were taking some of your phone calls, and you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. And we're also on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And we have been taking some of your comments as well that you can put right underneath the live video feed. But just so you know, during the next segment and for the rest of the hour, we'll be talking with Max Lucado. Max Lucado will be in studio. He's got a great new thing that he's in town for called One for Israel, as well as a new book that we'll be talking with him about called Unshakable Hope. I read the book yesterday. Absolutely phenomenal book. He's got one little quote that I can't wait to share with him. He just has such a great turn of phrase and just has a way with words. But nevertheless, that will come next segment and for the rest of the hour. Right now, we're talking about President Trump. So let's go ahead and jump to the phone lines. What you think about President Trump and his tweet yesterday relative to Hurricane Maria and the death toll in Puerto Rico. So we're going to jump on over to Georgia right now. Sweet Georgia with Sweet Caroline. Caroline, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Caroline, what's your point of view?
Well, I really don't know if President Trump is saved or not. But my comment is that he feels persecuted by the media. Mm-hmm. But the problem I see is that he comes off really rough. He jumps, it seems like, on people that he's supposed to serve and protect, which is something kind of different than I ever thought would happen. Is that if you're the leader of a nation or a husband or a pastor for that matter, and that you're saying something about individual people in the place that you are in leadership over, I think then if there was love in you, that if you changed your tone and showed love forgives a whole lot of things. So even the stuff that you may say on a tweet, but you say it, the things that you would say in love, meaning that you care about somebody else and what they're going through, and even their jobs. I mean, there's just such an array of conversation that he has on Twitter, and it's always toward a person. And so when you do that, you open up yourself to criticism.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say if you gave love, that they would love you back and they would forgive some of those tweets.
Yeah. We're reminded of 1 Peter 4, right? It's from Caroline. It's that love covers a multitude of things. And it's just that reality that we've been called, we're called to be known by our love, according to John 13. Not only called to be known by our love, we recognize the power of love, right? Love is the thing that compelled Paul and compels us, according to 2 Corinthians 5:14. And then the reality that love can cover over a multitude of things with us. Yeah. And sometimes it's just the tone. It's just it. And again, it goes back to this reality. Like, thank you so much, Caroline, for your call. Like, I support the president. We were just talking, Lathan, during the break. There's so many good things that our president has done. We can go down the list: the judicial appointments, what he's done for religious liberty, what he's done relative to ISIS, what he's done with North Korea, the deregulations, the economic reforms, tax reforms. The list can go on and on and on about some of the great things that our president's done. But then there are things, though, like this tweet, for example, from my perspective, and I'm willing to be wrong. You can call in 800-351-1212. Like, this tweet is it's just not right. It could be done better, right? Or
certainly.
maybe.
I mean, I spent some time in my career in the political world and crafting message and working in campaigns and that sort of thing. And there's a way to do things that is typically successful.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we also have to remember this guy got elected by doing things
completely
different than they had ever been done.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's easy, to say, well, I wish you would do it this way, or I wish you'd do it that way, or, this isn't really the way, good politicians handle things
Mm-hmm.
like this. And I'm not doubting that,
Mm-hmm.
but you also got to remember this guy has been unconventional from day one.
Yeah.
And it won him the presidency.
Yep.
And there is a large group of dedicated supporters of his that they love him specifically for this.
Mm-hmm.
They like the guy that you hit me, I hit you back.
Yeah.
And I think there were a lot of people, conservatives, Republicans, who also got frustrated on the other end of that spectrum with President Bush. As much
Mm-hmm.
as we liked President Bush,
yeah.
It's like he never responded.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was constantly under attack, and he just never took anybody to task
Yeah.
for it or stood up. It seemed like, anyway,
Yeah.
I hate to say never, but there were a lot of people who were frustrated with that
Yeah.
there were plenty of opportunities for him to push back, and he didn't. And I think maybe what you saw in the Republican base, anyway, in that primary election was, well, you don't ever have to worry about this guy pulling any punches, and this guy is, somebody they related to. And there was something about that appealed to a lot of people.
Yeah. Republicans,
Independents, and Democrats, because he would not have won Michigan, Ohio, some of the states that he won without crossover from blue collar Democrats.
Yeah.
And so I think we're kidding ourselves if we think we're going to see this behavior in him change.
No.
I don't disagree that a lot of times the message that he is maybe trying to get out is so clouded by the messenger that people don't really even take time to respond
Mm-hmm.
to what he's saying because the tone is so abrasive to them. But at the same time, we knew exactly what we were getting, and people voted for him.
Yeah, this was a guy that was willing to call his campaign opponent and Ted Cruz's father, insinuate that he played a part in the assassination of JFK. Like, we knew that this guy was a fighter, and lo and behold, he has been a fighter.
I think some of the best analysis I heard about him, and I'm sorry that I can't remember who I heard it from first. I would totally give them credit, but they said the people that take Trump seriously don't take him literally, and the people that take him literally never. We're going to take him seriously.
Yep, Selena Zito over
exactly.
Pittsburgh Gazette.
And
yeah,
I go back to that every time one of these scenarios pops up.
Mm-hmm.
The people that take him seriously don't take him literally at every word that he tweets or every character that comes out of his mouth. And despite, I think, the press's attempts to drive a wedge between him and his base of support,
it's not happening.
It's not happening.
It's not happening. He's got a pretty built-in, solid 40% that he's not moving from, or a 35-40% that really is lockstep. And we'd love to hear from you, though. You can call in 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Perhaps you've been involved in a political discussion with people and wondered how they could be so naive about foreign policy or criminal justice because they just wanted to believe every person is basically good. Perhaps you've been sharing your faith with someone who rejected the idea of a savior because he or she rejected the idea of human sinfulness. So many people in America are naive about human nature, evil, and sin because they live in one of the greatest countries in the world that is insulated from the harmful realities of life. In many countries, greed and corruption are a way of life. I know that people in America complain about political corruption, but it isn't anything compared to what is a daily experience in many other countries. We're also shielded from strife and civil war. We've had an occasional terrorist attack that is unsettling, but we live in a world far removed from the daily threats people in other countries face. Dennis Prager writes about his experience at the University of California in Berkeley. He had a debate or dialogue with two left-wing students. His final question to them was, "Do you believe people are basically good?" Without hesitation, they said yes. He reminded them that they could only think that way because they live in such a decent country insulated from poverty, corruption, and war. But he was troubled that just 2 generations after Auschwitz, they could be so naively believing in this. Since no Western religion based on the Bible teaches that people are basically good, this naivete is obviously the result of secularism. This naive view of human nature keeps many from seeing the need for deterrence and protection from evildoers, and it keeps them from seeing their need for the gospel. It is one of the greatest mental obstacles we face whenever we engage in a discussion about human nature. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Universal 1440, Unbroken, Path to Redemption, the rest of World War II hero Louis Zamperini's true story, now playing, rated PG-13.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined in studio by Lathan Watts. We'll eventually have Max Lucado here in studio, but we're going to continue talking about President Trump on this September 14th, which also just happens to be my mother's birthday, so happy birthday, Mom. But also on that, I'm going to score so many points for doing that right now. I just need you guys to know this. And she would hate the fact that I've talked. So what one person on Facebook said, was it Trash Trump? I think, was it Trash Trump Friday is what somebody said? I think it's important. They're calling it Trash Trump Friday because I think I'm being a little too antagonistic towards our president. So let me clear the record a little bit here, Lathan. And so if you'll indulge me for a second, I want the listeners to know that I think our president, his administration has done some phenomenal things. Like let's go through the list, shall we? Let's think about it from a business perspective. There's been the economic reforms, there's been the tax plan, there's been the deregulation at a ridiculous rate. At one time, it was for every regulation that was passed, there was 21 that was taken off the books. I don't know if that's still true now, but I know that was at one point a couple of months ago. From a business perspective, he is crushing it, as we millennials say. Then you look at it from a foreign policy perspective, what he's done with North Korea right now to at least get them to come closer. At least they're not launching test rockets at the very least. But what he's done relative to what he's done with the EU right now to be able to try to help to come up with new trade deals for that. The upcoming deal that will come because of the U.S. and Mexico specifically, and hopefully Canada comes in on the reconfiguration of NAFTA right now. What he's done relative to China and starting to put pressure on them. I think there's much to celebrate there. We think about it from the economic standpoint. We think about the job rate right now. Not only are wages going up, but there's job openings that are at historic levels right now. There's the job unemployment rates at a low level right now. There's just a lot of great things to be able to celebrate. Tax cuts that have happened right now. And then on Friday, of all places, because we've got you, religious liberty. Let's talk about the justices that he's appointed. Over 60 justices, potentially 2 coming up. 2 will be confirmed on the Supreme Court. Let's talk about just the religious liberty directives that he's issued. Right, there's been so much good that our president and his administration have done. So hear me. This is not Trash Trump Friday, contrary to what you would hear on Facebook, and I hope that you're not hearing that. But I will say that I want to believe it to be true that two things can be true that aren't necessarily congruent one with another. That our president has done a lot of good, but there are some things that I just disagree about what our president has done, and disagree with me, and I won't take it like you don't support me. Lathan, am I wrong in that instance?
No, I mean, look, you mentioned religious liberty, and we are at First Liberty Institute. I mean, we're thrilled with the judicial appointments. We are over the moon about the executive order from the president protecting religious liberty. At the same time, we had an op-ed. Kelly Shackford, our CEO, published an op-ed because there was a potential nominee that we were not happy with, who did not have a good record on religious liberty, and so we said so.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just being a good American.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you don't, just because he's your guy doesn't mean you're bound to defend everything that he ever does. And I think that's part of this sort of political kind of tribalism that we've gotten into over many years. I mean, I'm just not just going to blame it on this president or in the last few years, but this willingness to, well, it's my guy, so I got to defend him no matter what. You don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think, honestly, if you are interested in ever getting someone from the other side to listen to your point of view or consider things from your perspective, you do yourself a favor in the realm of credibility when you are willing to stand up and say, hey, look, I like a lot of the things this president has done, but I also disagree with him on X, Y, Z, whatever that may be, whether it's his Twitter feed or the tone of some comment or whatever that may be, whether you're not, I'm not a particular fan of tariffs, right?
Yeah, not a fan either.
But I will also say, the rest of his economic policy is, undeniably successful.
Yeah.
And I think even with tariffs, I think everything is sort of a negotiation with him.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's using tariffs to get to a long-term better deal, and you will probably see those tariffs either reduced or go away when he gets the deal that he's after.
And I think that's a great point to be able to bring up. One, there's the transactional nature, I think, of President Trump. And then two, I think you can still criticize someone even though you support them. So for a perfect example, I criticized Derek. I'm a huge Vanderbilt football fan. I criticized Derek Mason those first 2 years because I didn't know what we were doing as Vanderbilt bringing on Derek Mason. But you better believe when he's beat Tennessee, not just 1 year in a row, but 2 years in a row, I'm the biggest fan of Derek Mason now. I still supported him. I supported my team, but I didn't necessarily agree with the direction that they were headed. But now I'm a huge Derek Mason fan. Mike Mularkey, I'm a Titans fan through and through. It's not looking good for us this year. I'd hate to be ominous this early in the season, but I'm very frustrated right now. But I love the direction that we're going in. Was not a fan of Mularkey especially when he got his extension. All of that to say, I think it's okay we can support, but we can also criticize. I don't think you have to choose one or the other. I think it's appropriate, and I think it's biblical to be able to do that. But I think it's also, to move to the second point, the reality that we're just living in we have a transactional president right now. He knows constituencies that he's identified constituencies that are necessary for him to be able to continue to receive support for the re-election in 2020, and he's trying to appease those constituencies. Very transactional in nature, and that's just the reality.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between sharing your values and sharing your priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And any leader, Trump or any president for that matter, can share your priorities even if he doesn't necessarily share your values. Mm-hmm. And it's important to understand the difference between those.
Mm-hmm.
With regards to religious liberty and judicial appointments and all those things, I think Trump, even though we always talk about him, well, he's not a politician. He is not the typical politician.
No.
But once he stepped into that race, he became a politician.
Yeah.
And he has some very good instincts, and I think some very wise people around him in some circles, that he recognized how important filling the vacancy left by Justice Scalia was going to be in that election. And I think that's why he was willing to publish, here's a list of people that I will consider for judicial nominations. Nobody had ever really done that before. And that gave people that were maybe on the fence, that gave them at least, look, here is documentary evidence of this is the kind of guy I will put on the court.
I loved what he did.
And that was a brilliant
I thought that was
political strategic move, and it worked.
Yeah.
I think that was, if you had to point to one factor in what elected him, I would say it was that list coming out, knowing that the next president was going to appoint Scalia's successor.
Yeah, that's huge. So let's jump on over to Georgia right now. We've got Robert in Georgia. Robert, are you there?
I am here.
Hey, Robert, what's your point of view?
You need to have more faith in your producers that will be here. I love the book of Proverbs and God's wisdom. And one of the Proverbs says, do you see a man who is hasty in his words? There's more hope for a fool than for him. Another proverb says, harsh words stir up anger.
Oh, yeah.
Another proverb says, do not answer a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him. Answer a fool as his folly deserves, lest he be wise in his own eyes. From my study of Scripture, President Trump, whom I voted for and probably will again, communicates like a fool. He is easily provoked. He speaks without thinking, and he's just a train wreck in communication. Does he get things done? Sure does. Could he do it in a more godly way? Yep. And the last thing I will say is, I think that Christians are becoming ambassadors for Trump more than ambassadors for Christ. I think we need to not say, well, he is just this, he's just that, but say, I should be better, he should be better, we should be like Christ, and not just dismiss some of the foolishness that we see.
Yeah, it reminds me, Robert, of the idea, so to continue with the Proverbs, or I guess this is more specifically Psalm 22, the reality, some trust in chariots, some trust in horses, but we'll trust in the name of the Lord our God. We're all broken. We all have room to be able to improve. I think especially what's happening in the Catholic Church right now, one of the things that I'm reminded of is Martin Luther on the 95 Theses, the very first one. He says that the whole of Christian life is one of repentance. I'm not expecting anybody to be perfect, but especially if you're claiming the name of Christ, I am expecting progression. I want to be better today than yesterday, better tomorrow than today. And I realize I got a really quick tongue, Robert, as you can probably tell. I've said things. I can even think about some of the things that I've said in the first 2.5 hours that I need to go repent of. But I want to be able to, one, be open to the criticism that individuals give me, and two, recognize it within my own self that I'm not perfect. I'm seeking after perfection, and perfection has a name. His name is Jesus, and he offers me the forgiveness of my sins. And because of that, hopefully I get better because of that undeserved grace that he's given me, so that I don't continue to perpetuate the same mistakes into the future, in order that I can make his kingdom come, his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. But nevertheless, Robert, thank you so much for calling in. We've got to take a break, but when we come back, we'll continue talking about the President Trump tweets. We'll be back right after this.
From Universal 1440 comes Unbroken, Path to Redemption. Based on the best-selling book telling the rest of the true story of Olympian and World War II hero Louis Zamperini.
Tonight, there's a drowning man just looking for some type of hope for the future. But there's a lifeline. Just reach out.
Unbroken, Path to Redemption. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. Now playing. More information is available at unbrokenfilm.com.
You don't become an Olympian without investing all you've got. You don't become a war hero without putting it all on the line. Those who leave a mark on this world demonstrate they believe in something greater than themselves, a purpose, a cause. In a time of fake news, the need for solid information is perhaps greater than ever. Bring truth to the nation by joining the Truth Team at Point of View. Our cause needs heroes like you. Demonstrate what you believe. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined by Lathan Watts of the First Liberty Institute, and we have been talking a little bit about President Trump and some of the tweets that he sent out. And so we'll also have Max Lucado that'll be joining us in studio here shortly to talk about his new book, Unshakable Hope, as well as talk about this great event that's going to be coming up with Israel for One. And so you want to stick around for that. He'll be joining us during the next segment. And so we are going to be continuing to take some of your phone calls right now. And we've been talking about President Trump in a shocking twist and trying to figure out from the evangelical perspective what we're to make of some of the tweets from yesterday. How individuals kind of took qualms with the reality of maybe some of the belittling of what happened relative to the kind of the Puerto Rico situation earlier this year with just some of the numbers. Some individuals were saying that we can still support him, though we can disagree with him on this instance, especially tone and tenor and message of what he said. And then others are kind of the mind, well, if the studies are correct that 90% of the press coverage is negative of President Trump, I don't want to add to that. I want to continue to put individuals on in such a way that it might be helpful. And so we'll take one phone call right now. We've got Mike in Illinois. Mike, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Mike, what's your point of view?
Well, in regards to President Trump and the way he responded to the tweet about the number of people that were killed in the Puerto Rico hurricane, I think, like a previous caller had pointed out with several proverbs, the one that stood out to me was answer a fool according to his folly was exactly what President Trump did. He basically responded in kind and played the numbers game. It was drastically different from what the other side said, so that made it even more egregious and everything. But I think if he would have raised the bar a little bit and said, well, that's not the point, the point is lives were lost, blah, 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 and kind of stayed away from that numbers game and not answered in kind, answered the way he should have, that might have won some more points with a lot of people.
Yeah. I completely agree. Thank you so much, Mike, for your phone call. I think it does bring up this reality that, as we've historically has always said, has been played out, that it's just really hard to get exact numbers on hurricanes and natural disasters. And so we want to recognize that regardless of whether 6 or 18, that's obviously a very low number, but there's numbers as high, according to a Harvard study, as 8,000. And we want to, especially as the body of Christ, we want to mourn with those who mourn, we rejoice with those who rejoice. And there was just a lot of lives that were lost. And let's mourn with them. Let's pray for them, that God would just continue to redeem that tragedy for the good of his name, for the joy of souls, and for the glory of this world. But nevertheless, we're going to transition a little bit, and it'll be a very smooth transition from President Trump to the prolific, legendary author, Max Lucado. Max is joining us in studio. He's here to talk about his latest book, Unshakable Hope, as well as a new event that's going to be that he's in town for. Max, how are you today?
Thank you very much. It's a real treat to be here. I bring you greetings from San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, that is great. Well, actually, I'm going to be in San Antonio here in a couple of days. I believe one of your daughters is actually going to be at a Any Woman Can event in San Antonio on Tuesday night.
Well, my goodness. Well, tell her hello for me.
Deal. And so Max, tell us a little bit. Why are you in town? What brings you to town?
Well, a couple of things. I have a new book out called Unshakable Hope, and so we're taking advantage of being in Dallas to do some media. I've made a few television spots and some radio spots. It's really great to be here with you guys today. I'm also here to speak at One for Israel event tomorrow night in Dallas, and then Sunday night in Houston. Be running down there, and so I'm still pastoring a church in San Antonio, so I videoed my message in advance. It's a great day we live in, forever. If you were gone, you had to get a guest speaker, and now you can capture your message on Wednesday and show it on Saturday and Sunday. So I won't be at the church over the weekend, but I'm very excited about participating in the One for Israel event Saturday night and Sunday night.
Well, that's phenomenal. So tell us a little bit about One for Israel, the organization specifically. What is that?
Well, One for Israel exists to provide a very culturally sensitive handshake of faith toward the Jewish people. And they do just a phenomenal job of presenting the gospel in under, like I say, culturally sensitive, appreciative of the remarkable heritage of the Jewish people and God's unique plan for the nation of Israel, and do so in such a fashion that's appropriately tuned apologetics with very sensitive awareness of the unique call that God has for the Jewish people. And then in addition, the One for Israel organization supports seminary training for young men and women. I shouldn't say just young, but primarily young men and women in Israel, and equipping just a generation of young people to share the gospel in their language, in their culture, in an effective and life-changing way.
Yeah,
it's a wonderful ministry.
That's phenomenal. And you know, you're so right. Just on the biblical narrative, it's just very clear that God has just a special heart. God has a special place in his heart for the people of Israel and for the Jewish people. And I just love the tone and tenor of your approach in dealing with that, to recognize that the Christians are new on the block when it comes to God's grand redeeming plan to that, and wanting to be sensitive to the history that many of the Jewish faith are carrying with that.
Yeah. Well, there's if you at least attempt to take a more literal approach to understanding prophecy, if you take a symbolic approach, allegorical approach, then you can kind of dismiss everything, and as that the Old Testament, that the Bible says about the nation of Israel as symbolic, and I just don't think that's a healthy approach to Scripture. You know, when I can tell you, when I was studying some years ago through the story of Daniel in the Old Testament, we were preaching through Daniel, and I got to the I believe it's Daniel chapter 9, when Daniel realized that the prophecy of Jeremiah had come to an end, that 70 years the children of Israel had been in Babylonian captivity. And that triggered Daniel going into a time of prayer, asking God to fulfill his prophecy. He had promised that after 70 years the children of Israel would be released. And that really changed me. It changed me, because here's a story of a prophet reading a prophet and responding to prophecy. And he did so literally. So back then, when I read that, I made a decision in my heart, if possible, take prophecy literally. And consequently, now when I read Israel, when I read about the covenant God has made with Israel, I'm going to take it literally. I don't think I can explain exactly why God has this astounding loyalty to this lineage, except, of course, for the fact that the Son of God came through that lineage. Yeah. Of course, that has a little bit to do with it. But you know, it's not up to me to understand why. But I do believe that God has a deep, unending love for the Jewish people. Consequently, whenever I have an opportunity to do a little part, I don't have a large part, but when I come alongside someone like One for Israel or Jews for Jesus, I sure enjoy the opportunity of doing so.
That's phenomenal. So tell us a little bit about this event that you'll be participating in tomorrow and over the weekend.
Well, I should have brought more details with me. I apologize. But there is a One for Israel webpage, oneforisrael.com. And if somebody wants more information, that'd be the quickest place to go. I'm infamous about showing up in an event, and all I know is that I love the organization, but tell me what time and where to go, and I'll be there. But don't tell me before the day of. So that's tomorrow. So I know that.
Yeah.
But what I've appreciated about the leadership of One for Israel is the remarkable ability that they've had to capture testimonies on YouTube and put those up, and those views are numbering in the millions. Numbering in the millions.
It's phenomenal. I saw one with Andrew Clavin, who's a media personality out of CRTV, and it was a phenomenal video that
well
they put
done,
together.
right?
Really
well done
with excellence, but also a clarity with the message, and just very gripping. And so the website is oneforisrael.com.
Correct.
And you can find out more information on One for Israel, and specifically about the event that Max Lucado will be at on Saturday and Sunday as well. But we've got to take a break right now. And so when we come back from the break, we're going to continue talking with Max Lucado, and we'll have also Lathan Watts here from the First Liberty Institute. And we will transition a little bit over to this new book that just came out. So in a shocking twist, Max Lucado has blessed the world again with another book. And we are so grateful. I got a chance to read Unshakable Hope over the past couple of days. And I will tell you, there's one quote in here that it's something that's still getting to me. And so on page 109, when you pick up your copy, it says, you've never seen yourself at your best. Even on your good days, you've been subject to bacteria, weariness, and wounds. And that was such a captivating thought that still has caused me to be wrestling with that. But nevertheless, we've got to take a break. But when we come back from the break, we'll have Max Lucado. We'll be talking about his book, Unshakable Hope. But if you have a question for Max, you can call in 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or jump over on Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. But we'll be back right after this.
Family leave that allows mothers to take time off work when a baby is born is a time-honored policy in America. More recently, dads have been receiving leave too. But traditionally, it's either unpaid or paid by a person's employer as a benefit. Some companies offer very generous paid family leave. Sometimes employees save up vacation or other paid time off and use it to stay home with a newborn or newly adopted child. Now, Senator Marco Rubio has introduced a bill that would put government into the equation. He has rolled out legislation that would essentially allow new parents to borrow from their future Social Security benefits to pay for time off when their baby comes. This bill supposedly pays for itself by fast-forwarding to retirement when parents would forego the first 3 to 6 months of Social Security checks. I appreciate the sentiment. Senator Rubio loves to help parents, but there are many problems with his proposal. First, it creates a new entitlement. What entitlement that has started out small and targeted has ever remained that way? Second, Social Security already has a lot of pressure on it. It's projected to be insolvent in 16 years. Parents having children now won't retire for at least another 30 years. Third, the proposal would remove the incentive for companies to offer paid family leave. One analysis done by Ben Giddis at the American Action Forum found that 2/3 of workers who took family leave were paid, with most receiving their full salary. Mr. Rubio claims his proposed leave policy would not expand government, but the Wall Street Journal asks, what is expanding government if not taking a benefit financed by private industry and administering it through a government program? In this current worker shortage, companies who want to attract young workers could offer generous family leave or flexible schedules to accommodate child rearing. We don't need a government entitlement. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, and I'm joined in studio by Lathan Watts of the First Liberty Institute, Max Lucado as well. And so I need to go ahead and confess to you all, I've made a mistake, which is not shocking to most of our listeners. I accidentally gave you the wrong address for this event. So it's oneforisrael.org, one spelled out, forisrael.org, where you can find out more information specifically here in Dallas. If you're here in the area, the Max Lucado will be at this event on Saturday and Sunday this weekend. Find out more information there, as well as just find out more information on the actual website. Like I said before, there's a video. I only watched the one with Andrew Clavin, but it's one, it's done with excellence. 2, it's captivating, and 3, there's just a great story about the organization and his part in the opponent. And so just so grateful. But also we've got Max because he has written another book called Unshakable Hope. So tell our audience a little bit about this book, Max.
All of my books, Nick, begin as sermon series for our church, and this particular book emerged out of a series of lessons that I did on the promises of God. And I was interested in the promises of God because I came across a just a statement in a commentary that said there are over 7,000 promises in the Bible.
Wow.
7,400 and something, he said. I didn't go through and count them all, but I know there's a lot of promises in the Bible. It made me think if there are so many promises in the Bible, then God must want us to be aware of them and even more so depend upon them. And you start reading through the Bible and you realize that one common denominator of all the major characters in Scripture is they really believed in a promise-making and promise-keeping God. They believed that, Abraham believed God, Noah believed God, Jacob eventually believed in God's promises. Joseph believed that God could take what was evil and turn it into something good. Joshua believed that God could lead the children of Israel into the promised land. So one story after another of people who, perceived or read or understood the promises of God, and they chose to make decisions based on those. And I realized that that's really where hope comes from. Hope comes not from the perfect circumstance, but from trusting our perfect Heavenly Father as He makes these promises and fulfills them. So the challenge of this book is pretty simple. It's create your own quiver of promises. Go to that list of 7,000 plus, find half a dozen or a dozen, learn them well, and build your life on those promises instead of building your life on circumstances.
Yeah, I thought it was such a poignant question that you asked in page 8. The question is not will we keep His promises, but will we build our lives upon them? Because that's really is the crux of the matter, right? That God's promises are there. Promises always produce hope is what we continue to see all throughout the biblical narrative. And it's that I love that idea of building the quiver, especially because you highlight this with some of the statistics in the beginning. We're living in a very doubtful age and it's just very to a certain degree, the depression rates are higher, suicide rates are higher right now, and there's a lot of individuals out there probably that are listening right now that are struggling right now because they're doubting the promises of God or have chosen not to live their lives on the promises of God.
Yeah, skepticism, cynicism, materialism, all of these views of life or philosophies of life that really remove God from the conversation. That do not include God in a calculation of why we're here and where we're headed, that can create a very sad life, And I think we're seeing that. I believe the statistic I share in the book is that suicides are up 26% since 1999. That's an epidemic, isn't it? And I know the answers as to why that is are very complex, and I don't want to oversimplify it. But part of it is we're not doing a good job as a people of generating hope. We're creating more information opportunities than ever. We're traveling faster than ever, but we're not in trusting or giving to people a sense of why we're on this earth and where we're headed. And the promises of God, I think, can do that.
I think it is fascinating because, again, I think many of us are acquainted with the fact. I think for every suicide, there's one study that indicates that 6 people are intimately connected with every suicide.
Wow.
Since 2015, Gene Twenge has done some research and indicates that up until they started keeping this research, there's always been, for individuals under the age of 17, there's been more homicides than suicides. Well, in 2015, that number switched to now among individuals that are lower than 17, there's more suicides than homicides, and it's been ever since. So we're starting to see this rise and this skepticism and this hopelessness.
Well, what do they mean? There are 6 people tightly connected.
So 6 people would be considered intimate friends of the person that had that committed suicide,
and so they carry the weight.
They're carrying the weight because even though that person has decided to stop, they continued, and they're carrying that weight right now. And so I love the idea of building promises. And so as you were reading this book right now, you talked about reading the commentary and finding out the multitude of promises that God has littered all throughout the biblical narrative. Is there a promise that you really just hold on to? Is there something that's just very
there's
resonant?
one that I've gone back to over and over. It's in Psalm chapter 30 and verse 6. Weeping may last for the night, but joy comes with the morning. I've turned to that promise a lot through the years as I've conducted funerals or talked to people who are grieving or who are in a period of just sadness themselves for reasons due to finances or work or whatever. And I like saying, God knows that weeping comes with the night, Nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you're in a season, it's nighttime. But don't think for a second it's going to be like this forever. We just had a next-door neighbor over for dinner a week ago tonight, and he's, I think, 69, and his wife, at the age of 72, passed away just a couple of weeks ago. And he's just distraught. He's just distraught. He kept saying, I thought I would go first. I thought I'd go first. And so now he's living with this heaviness, and he really thinks it'll last forever. He cannot envision. And I tried to encourage him, of course, and hopefully I made a difference. But when really challenging times come, oftentimes we assume I'm never getting out of this. We lose hope, right? We lose hope. Well, the Bible is full of promises that say that acknowledge. Yep, it's a tough time. John 16:33 is another promise just like that. Jesus said, in the world you'll have tribulation, but be of good cheer because I've overcome the world. It's just like, yeah, I acknowledge it's world's going to stink sometimes, but I've overcome the world. So I think the honest assessment of life, it is going to be tough, but things are going to get better is exactly what many people need today.
Yeah, it's that reality of just you continue to see, we can lament the fact that individuals just aren't reading their Bibles at levels that they used to. They're not participating in church attendance as much as they once did. But the reality is that even though we might have run away, but God's just running just as fast after us.
Good word.
And not only that, but the truth that God's never promised to keep us away from hard situations, but he's always promised to walk with us through them.
There you go.
And so just such a rich thing. And so you can pick up your copy of Unshakable Hope, I'm sure, at all your local bookstores, as well as on Amazon.com. You can find a link to Unshakable Hope at our website at pointofview.net. And Max, thank you so much for joining us in studio.
Time went too quickly.
Oh, I know.
You're doing a great job. I think Kirby needs to, turn it over to you. I'm just kidding.
Kirby, if you're
hello,
listening.
Kirby. Hello, Kirby. Miss you, buddy.
But nevertheless, you can find out more information about the book on our website, pointofview.net. And also be sure to check out oneforisrael.org. Max Lucado will be there over the weekend. Again, one spelled out, forisrael.org. I apologize. It's not .com, it's .org. Lathan, thank you so much for being here with us.
Always glad to be here.
And you can find out more information. Where can they find out more information?
FirstLiberty.org.
Okay.
All information about our cases and how to follow our cases and communicate directly with us is there. Or you can text the word Liberty to 474747.
Okay.
You'll get a response back with prompts there. It's great to communicate with us directly. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter as well. But if you know what's going on with Facebook and Twitter, you're not guaranteed to see everything that we want you to see. So let us communicate with you directly.
474747.
Text the word Liberty.
Text the word Liberty. Lathan, thank you so much for joining us. Max, again, thank you so much for the time.
Good to meet you.
And so we will be back here on Monday, but until then, be sure to check out the website, pointofview.net, or the Facebook page, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. We'll see you next time.
It wasn't long ago it seemed every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is